Alright everybody, can't believe we're down to the last third of the seasons, but we're just gonna get into it. As a whole, Friendship is Magic Season 7, I think the season overall is very middle of the road. Much like Season 6, there are some really good episodes, and honestly, some of the show's best episodes are from this season, but it also has some really, really noticeably bad episodes. And like I said, from here on out, there's no excuse if there's a bad episode. And this is really the only other season outside of Season 1 where this is actually a top 25 list instead of a top 24, except that it's reversed because instead of being the 2-part premiere and only a 1-episode finale, we have 2 separate episodes for the premiere and then the 2-part finale. So let's just jump into it. The top 25 My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 7 episodes. Number 25, Marks and Recreation. Honestly, I am really surprised that this episode isn't more hated than it should be. As I said in the review, I like how the episode attempts to talk about the concept of cutie marks and how it works. But the execution is downright abysmal. One of the things I can't stand about the episode, Rumble, who I also call them Russell, but honestly either name could go, is nothing more than a spoiled, entitled brat who does nothing but bitch and moan about cutie marks, but the episode constantly addresses that you can do other things even if you earn your cutie marks, and Rumble has this narrow-minded delusion of grandeur, thinking that they just can't do anything so they won't earn a cutie mark. I should also mention the Cutie Mark Crusaders also don't really help the fact that it completely supports the other end of the extreme, where it's basically siding on the fact that, cutie marks make you special, but they don't really come to any kind of agreement. And Rumble honestly completely ruins this entire episode. And I get that they're supposed to be kids, but it's like he comes up with the veilment of arguments where he basically pulls out the book of every dumb excuse in the book. This was one of the most arrogant, ear-grating episodes. Oh, and I should also mention that this show also presents one of the worst songs in the entire show as well. Honestly, I don't want to delve deeper and turn this into another diatribe of why Marks and Recreation sucks, but quite honestly, I really cannot stand this episode. I didn't like it when I first watched the episode back in 2017, and I don't like the episode now. So yeah, Marks and Recreation still sucks. It should honestly be more hated than it should be, or not as much, and it is the worst episode of Season 7. Number 24, Daring Done. You just had to make this personal. I really hate the stupid cliche that Marvel and DC, and on some occasions the Michael Bay Transformers movies did it, where all of a sudden all the citizens and side characters considered to be the main protagonist evil over one simple stupid thing to what the bad guy has to say, and ignoring all the other accomplishments that they've done. I really hate this trope because it just pads things out, and it makes you wonder, like, I want to yell at them, like, listen, you guys are all just a bunch of sheep and morons. Honestly, this was probably where the Daring Do episodes, after Stranger and Fanfiction, this was when the Daring Do episodes really started to suck for me. And while Stranger and Fanfiction can have some defenses for it, Daring Done, there's literally no excuse after this. I can't stand the fact that all the side characters are morons, and we're supposed to believe that all of Daring Do's accomplishments are supposed to be overshadowed because of what Cavaleron said, and we've already known it was going to be Cavaleron in like the first few minutes since we knew what was going on. This was basically the point where I stopped caring about the Daring Do episode, and the last Daring Do episode didn't make me like the episode even more. I probably would have put this lower on Marks and Recreations if not for the fact that I was expecting that in after Stranger Than Fanfiction, I was kind of not looking forward to the Daring Do episodes, and it gave me exactly what I thought was going to happen when I figured out what the story was. But at the very least, some bits of dialogue and action was exciting, and that's more than I could say than Marks for Recreations. But yeah, Daring Done is still a terrible episode nonetheless. Number 23, All Bottled Up. Honestly, this, much like every little thing she does, this was actually an episode I used to like, and honestly, I think if I remember, I had this episode in like the top 10, but as time went on, I started to hate the episode more and more. And that was all because of Trixie. I should also mention that the B plot was incredibly boring, and while our Rumble song in Marks and Recreations is still awful, well, the song that the main six did is very generic, and that's why I played the generic song clip in the review, because that's how I felt about the song, because there's literally nothing to talk about. And basically, Trixie kind of proved how she is an absolute toxic pony, and all the concerns that Twilight had in those second prances were absolutely justified. Right. And with all that being said, the only reason why this is number 23 and why I think it's better than both Marks and Recreations and Daring Done is for the fact that the moral is a very good moral where it shows what happens when you bottle up all your emotions. But then, and it gets completely overshadowed when another episode does this at least 2 seasons later, making All Bottled Up completely null and void. Like, making it a pretty useless episode. Number 22, Once Upon a Zeppelin. I've heard there are some defenses for this episode, but this is another one of those episodes that I can literally not stand. Because much like Daring Done, almost every character outside the royal family got hit in the head with the idiot stick, outside of the fact that Twilight's parents basically accepted a cruise, no questions asked, and on top of that, the cruise getting run by Iron Will, who basically pony-napped the two princesses, blackmailed Twilight, and also basically took the cruise under false pretenses, making him an all-time scammer. The whole episode was dumb, and I felt dumb for watching it. That being said, this episode is still better than the previous 3, because there was at least a couple of jokes I did find myself laughing at, mostly either Shining Armor air sickness jokes. That was literally one of the only few jokes I did get a laugh of. And honestly, Caden's and Twilight's conversations throughout the episode were also one of the few bright spots. But other than that, the episode was dumb, and I got dumber after watching it. Number 21, Secrets and Pies. The whole episode is filler. It's filler, and I didn't like any minute of it. I understand that the comedy was supposed to be over the top, and that was the entire point, but I couldn't get over the fact that Rainbow Dash was lying to Pinkie for years about not liking her pies, and the whole setup just felt absolutely contrived, and essentially you just wanted to fast forward to a lot of the stuff just to get to the liar reveal trope. And this is honestly the type of episode that I really would have expected at either Season 1 or Season 2, not Season 7. Speaking of an episode like that, number 20, Honest Apple. This was probably one of the shortest reviews I did for this season, and honestly it was one of the shortest episode reviews I've done in a while, because Honest Apple literally gives me nothing to work with. Outside of Applejack just being preachy and then getting called out for her honesty by Rarity, but, and like I said, this episode could have been good, if only because of the timing. I think, as I said in the review, if Honest Apple was an episode that came out in like either Season 1, Season 2, maybe Season 3, I would consider it a good episode, and I would be a little bit more forgiving of it. But this is Season 7. We are far past the point of these types of episodes. That being said, I'm putting this above the bottom 5 is because, as I said, there was literally only one good joke that I found humorous, and that was essentially Rarity basically using a guitar for Pinkie and making an electric guitar joke. And it does give at least a decent moral about honesty and opinions to other ponies. Those are literally the only 2 things that I did find very good and interesting that kept it out of the bottom 5. But again, because of the timing of this episode, how of how weak the writing was in this episode, this was an episode that I would be a little bit more lenient of if it came out in either seasons 1, 2, or 3, but this is season 7, and there's no leeway for this episode. Number 19, Not Asking for Trouble. This is yet another one of those episodes that I seem to hate, but everybody else seems to like. It's maybe just because I'm really just not a fan of the Yak characters, not a fan of Prince Brotherhood, because I just found them to be an arrogant, condescending prick to Pinky, even when Pinky insists on trying to help. And honestly, the whole ending of basically having Pinky get the main six to secretly help out the Yaks in Yakistan from almost getting frostbite from an avalanche, and then Prince Brotherhood saying, "Oh yeah, you're officially part of the Yaks again," it made me go, what the fuck? I understand this episode did have good intentions, which is why I do think it's better than the last 6 episodes, but this is yet another episode that I really just cannot get into. It's not downright awful, but I do think it's a bad episode on my part. And while I did appreciate, learning more about the culture of Yakistan, which is a lot more than we got out of Party Poot, I do appreciate that, but Prince Brotherhood was just one of the most infuriating characters that just made it not so much of a fun experience. Number 18, Fluttershy Leans In. Alright, I understand that there are people that don't like this episode, and I can definitely see the problems with this episode, where I do appreciate Fluttershy's character development and how she was willing to stand up for herself and what she believed in. But I understand in the real world that Pinky was supposed to be the contractor, and if this happened in real life, nobody would want to work with her. I honestly kind of wish that that she would have just talked to her friends, and her friends would have just heard her out of what she would have thought of, and I could have been a little bit more forgiving of this episode. I don't hate this episode as much as everybody else, but I think it's kind of a whatever episode. But again, I still think it's better than the previous infuriating episodes. Number 17, Rock Solid Friendship. This is another one of those episodes that I just think is really overhated, because quite honestly, I did like some of the jokes that Pinky did, and yes, I know the whole Maud inadvertently getting Starlight to take over the village, blah, 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 blah. I don't care about that fact anymore, because the fact that people were still harboring that resentment and giving Starlight so much shit for that, it's like, I'm over it. I'm done. And I did like a lot of the jokes that Pinky threw in, but I guess really at the end of the day, I don't hate this episode a lot, and honestly there are aspects about the episode that I really do like. I did like how Maud and Starlight did have organic chemistry over the course of the episode, and I did like a lot of the jokes in the episode. But obviously the one thing that I will give this episode crap for is the fact that, well, Pinky going out of her way to cause a cave-in to keep Maud and Starlight trapped in the cave just so that they can bond together, that's not really a good thing for Pinky to do, and it's probably one of the scummiest things Pinky has done, but I'm not going to get too twisted up of it. Alright, I still think it's better than the other episodes. Number 16, A Flurry of Emotions. Honestly, I think probably I will give this episode this. There are definitely some cute moments that Flurry Heart does give. And honestly, it's a short, simple episode to show that Twilight was in over her head of doing multiple things at once while also trying to babysit Flurry Heart. And I did also like the side story of how much Cadence in Shining Armor got so used to parenting when Shining Armor goes to visit one of his friend's art studio. I did like that. I guess really at the end of the day, what only keeps this episode out of the top 15, because I think we're now at the point where the episodes do start to pick up, and this is a good episode, but I just think that the only reason that this episode doesn't crack the top 15 for me is that, honestly, I just found the other 15 episodes to be more memorable and, well, better. But it's not to take away anything from the episode. I think it basically goes to show, well, Flurry Heart can be adorable, and she basically is like any other baby, even though I would question how she was able to control her alicorn magic that fast, but not enough much to take away from the episode. Number 15, it isn't the main thing about you. This was overall a really enjoyable episode. I really like how crazy Rarity would get over losing her mane, but able to compromise herself and basically able to come up with a new design for her mane and make it a very fashionable thing after losing it. It definitely shows how creative and flexible Rarity can be, and it definitely really touched me of how far she was able to come. But at the same time, it's basically a little bit confusing how Rarity would overreact to something like this, given the fact that in the series premiere, she was willing to give up her strand of her tail, to essentially basically help out the sea serpent. So I wouldn't think that Rarity would have handled it better, but I do like how this episode shows that if you try to use magic to regrow your hair, it has to be taken from something, and it shows why magic doesn't work like that. It's still a good episode overall. Number 14, hard to say anything. I think this one, I really just have a love-hate relationship story. I do like the framing, how it basically the whole... I do like the framing, how this is basically one of the first Big Mac and Sugar Belle relationship episodes, and how it basically shows, well, not only do we get to see how well Starlight's village has gone a long way ever since Starlight became good, but we see that Big Mac has genuinely fallen for a pony like Sugar Belle. And I genuinely like their organic chemistry as the episode goes on, and I do like the meta humor of Big Mac basically calling out the Cutie Mark Crusaders to not do any love potions, to not have a repeat of Hearts and Hooves Day. But of course, there is one character that I'm really just not a fan of. As I said, I really cannot remember his name for the life of me, even after I watched the episode. But basically, everybody knows him as Justin Bieber Pony, whose name you can't remember. And the whole ending of how basically the fact that he's shy and talks around to ponies, even though he sings and acts like Justin Bieber before his testicle drops, and has a harem of girls that follow his every whim that were designed after the girls that fawned over Gaston in the animated Beauty and the Beast. It's like, are you serious? But yeah, this was definitely the first episode that basically, showed a sign of the Big Mac and Sugar Belle relationship, and that was actually and as of we know, as of now, it was the ship that ultimately won the Big Mac shipping wars. Number 13, Triple Threat. Honestly, I think this is probably one of the least talked about episodes of the season. I will have to knock some episodes points on the fact that it's one of those episodes where it's the classic misunderstanding of Spike basically trying to spend time with both Thorax and Ember, and then there we get the classic misunderstanding and both of them getting mad at Spike for basically not being a good friend. But after that, the episode did get better because honestly, Ember understanding pony culture and her trying to figure out the difference between Twilight and Starlight, that absolutely cracked me up. And the fact that Thorax and Ember were able to become very good friends of how well they bonded with Spike, and honestly, Ember helping Thorax be more assertive, while Thorax is able to help Ember be more compassionate, showed how well two races can bounce off of each other. And honestly, I think the trio of friends do have some really good chemistry, and quite honestly, I kind of wish that we had an episode we got to see more of their dynamics beyond what we already shown. But it definitely was a sign of things to come, and I do think it's an underrated episode. Number 12, To Change a Changeling. I really do enjoy this episode. Just seeing how different in times had changed after the Changelings were formed, and seeing how well Thorax was able to become a leader was definitely one thing to see. And for once, it was actually an episode that focused on Starlight and Trixie and had none of the main six involved, where we got to see Starlight and Trixie help out Thorax with his brother Pharynx, who was basically stuck in his old ways of how the Changelings used to be, but they're able to help each other out. But, like I said, as good as this episode is, I do have to knock this episode point, and what keeps it out of the top 10 is the fact that Trixie and Starlight and essentially caused the problem just so Theron could essentially become the hero until he ultimately ended up getting reformed. But other than that, it didn't make me really break my back over the episode. I do think it's a very good episode, and it really shows that if you're able to adapt and learn how to change your ways and accept the new ways of trying to be the opposite of what you used to be, I think this episode could go a long way, and it really goes to show that Thorax and Pharynx genuinely cared about each other. So, I really do like the episode. Number 11, Forever Philly. I think this episode really kind of touches the heartstrings because not only is it a Sweetie Belle rarity-focused episode, but I think this was the episode that should have came out before Hard to Say Anything, because seeing Sweetie Belle become more grown-up, being more mature, and honestly adopting her new role with helping the Cutie Mark Crusaders and helping ponies discover their talents shows that she's come a long way. And I do appreciate that Rarity's also come a long way because she wants to spend time with Sweetie Belle, but she doesn't realize that Sweetie Belle's not a filly anymore. She's becoming a grown-up foal where even though Rarity sees Sweetie Belle as her little sister, she doesn't see her as a young adult yet, but that's essentially what she has to realize. And honestly, it really kind of shows kind of the pains of growing up, especially when you have siblings, and you just feel so bad for treating them like crap. But then as time goes by, you realize as you get older, you still see them as your little brother and sister, but you have to accept that they're growing up, and that the things that they used to like, they may not like anymore. Honestly, given how, adults that are my age, I'm a 26-year-old that still watches his cartoons intended for children, especially since I just got into Bluey, a few weeks, last week, it's kind of suggestive, but the whole point of the episode is still there, and I think it's definitely a very good episode that tugs at the heartstrings. Number 10, A Health of Information. This is the episode that basically focuses on one thing: learning how to take care of yourself, not just physically, but also mentally. This is also one of the first episodes on this list that basically focuses on the legends of Equestria, and I didn't even bother bringing that part up in Daring Done, because Daring Done was absolutely infuriating that the legend of Sinanula was being told by a bunch of inconsiderate morons. However, in this episode, it definitely is incredibly dire when Zecora ends up getting sick and Fluttershy pushes herself so hard to the point where it seems like she nearly dies. And on top of that, the disease in this episode, when you really think about it a lot, it has a surprisingly high body count when you think about it too hard. But honestly, as I said, this episode basically focuses on the importance of learning how to take care of yourself. And especially in an age where mental health is so important, it's one of the episodes that's more relevant now compared to when it came out 7 years ago. So honestly, A Health of Information is a really important episode that I think kids and adults need to watch to learn the importance of taking care of yourself. Number 9, Campfire Tales. This is yet another episode about all the legends, but we end up getting 3 of them, and essentially this was the episode that focuses on the signs of learning about all the legends. I did find all the legends to be interesting. Hearing about Rockhoof, Flagmagnus, and Mistmane. Sorry. Anyways, hearing about those legends, it basically gives out more of the lore of Equestria, and essentially just kind of hear more of what these legends were like, and to see how they were like essentially the main 6 of what they would eventually become based on their elements. I think, as I said, admittedly, I think of the 3, Rockhoofs is the least interesting, because essentially the legend of him is just essentially how he became Thor. But Mistmane and Flagmagnus I found to be pretty interesting stories, and it really expanded upon the world of Equestria. And I do like the framing device for it, where essentially Applejack, Rarity, and Rainbow Dash take the Cutie Mark Crusaders to Winsome Falls again, and we see how much closer Scootaloo and Rainbow Dash have become. So, honestly, this was a great world-building episode, and it was honestly the first sign of things to come. Number 8, Parental Guidance. I think this is probably one of the most relatable episodes where pretty much the viewers that are like me, we're essentially like Rainbow Dash, where we love our parents so much, but at times they drive you crazy. But you realize that they love you so much and they support you in whatever you're doing, and at times you can take that for granted. And just seeing all the memes of Scootaloo essentially learning about Rainbow Dash's parents and what Rainbow Dash was like, as this was a pony that she looked up to, and just seeing Rainbow Dash basically seeing how supportive her parents are, and honestly, I mean, Rainbow Dash's parents are honestly pretty cool. They're just as enthusiastic as their daughter, so we kind of know where she got it from. Honestly, I think this is another episode that I think is more relatable to like the adults, and it kind of goes to show you that if you still have parents in your life, please say hi to them and at least talk to them every now and then. Number 7, Celestial Advice. Honestly, I really don't get why this episode is not really all that liked. I mean, yeah, as far as season premieres go, this one is probably the least interesting, but at the very least, it doesn't have some stupid contrived plot conveniences like the last season premiere, which is why I do think it's better than the Crystalling, despite the Crystalling being a 2-parter. Just seeing how Twilight is trying to figure out what to do with Starlight after she helped save Equestria from Crystal's return, and honestly breaking down over it, and then finding out from Celestia that she was the exact same way as Twilight is now, kind of goes to show more layers of what Celestia was like, and honestly, it gave us some more character depth to show that even Celestia wasn't sure about what to do. It gave sort of a kind of a layering of passing on the torch and showing that at Twilight, in spite of her now becoming the Princess of Friendship, we see that Celestia is nervous about not being needed anymore, and honestly, it honestly brought them a lot closer, and I thought it was overall a good season opener. Number 6, Uncommon Bond. Even though, yes, I did give Sunburst shit in the episode of what Starlight did, even though admittedly what Starlight did was a little bit creepy. However, I just like the fact that Sunburst is able to get past that and is able to see that Starlight is able to get both her old friends and new friends to essentially bond on with each other, essentially play games with each other, and are able to reconnect. Even if, as I said, some of Starlight's motives are a little bit, well, creepy. But like I said, I'm not going to take away from the episode too much because it honestly goes to show that even if it doesn't seem like that ponies don't really have a whole lot in common, if you learn through other ponies who are friends with them, you can actually learn a lot about information. And I think that's a side of friendship that should be talked about more, where on the surface, it doesn't seem like when you're with somebody, you don't seem to have like a whole lot in common. But if you dig deep enough and hear from other perspectives, you can see that you might have more in common than you initially thought. And I think this episode really does a good job with teaching that. Number 5, Fame and Misfortune. Hear me out. Now, I understand that the story is all over the place, and while this episode, yes, is one big call-out about the entire fandom in general, unlike episodes like, say, Stranger Than Fanfiction, I found a lot of the jokes to be more like nice little jabs rather than full-on insults. And honestly, if not for some other episodes, I think this one is probably the most overhated episode in the entire show. And I think people take it too seriously because they don't know how to get details right. Honestly, I really liked a lot of the meta humor. The Not Flawless song is very good. And yes, well, even though the side characters can get a bit grated because there are people in the fandom that are like that, I am not one of those people, and I didn't take a lot of the jokes that seriously because I am not an idiot. Overall, I think it really goes to... So, yeah, even though this episode's in the top 5, I will admit the moral is not handled the best. But honestly, I don't hate this episode, and honestly, if you hate this episode for many reasons, because of the mysterious Mr. Enter or the fiery Joker, I have one thing to say to you: calm the fuck down. I think it's a good episode, and honestly, I think there are people that just take it way too seriously and kind of proving the episode's point, which is why I think the episode is very good in explaining it. Number 4, Discord and Harmony. This is the episode that kind of shows what happens when Discord ends up being normal, and we find out it's absolutely terrifying that when Discord is not being a being of chaos, he could potentially fade away from existence and die. But what I love about this episode is that this is the first time where we actually get to see Discord try to be more normal and trying to be considerate to Fluttershy because he wants to do what makes her comfortable, and having a normal tea party could be the case. But we find out that Fluttershy loves Discord being part of the chaos because that's what she likes about him and why he's his friend. And it basically goes to show that you don't have to change your personality for anybody if you just continue to be yourself and you really care about this person or pony or whoever. You can generally get more mileage out of that friendship, and it goes to show that you can bond with any pony no matter what they think. And honestly, I really do enjoy this episode a lot, and I think it's something that kids need to be important. Like, you don't have to change yourself to fit in. Even if some people don't get your friendship with somebody at first, and you wouldn't think in a million years you'd be friends with that person, you can just continue to be yourself around that person, and they'll still get you because they'll understand you a lot. And this episode does a really good job with that. And honestly, there's nothing else I can say about this episode. Number 3, A Royal Problem. Essentially an episode that focuses on the two sisters, and I love it. Seeing Celestia and Luna have their roles cutie mark switched by Starlight Glimmer, while Starlight could have handled it a little bit better, this was actually one of the few times that Starlight actually did something right, because it helped Celestia and Luna give each other more appreciation of how hard each other works and how difficult their lives are when they're just doing their normal jobs. And honestly, the climax of this episode is absolutely great. Now, I know a lot of people give Daybreaker crap because she's essentially just Nightmare Moon, but only if Celestia was evil, and if the roles were reversed, that if Luna banished Celestia to the sun and all that. But honestly, I like how it gives us another layer of what Celestia could be if she decided to be full-on dictator, and the action was absolutely exciting. And to see Luna and Celestia work out their differences and realizes how different they all are, and how hard their lives are, and they understand one another, and how open they can be, it honestly gives more layers to their relationship. And on top of that, a lot of the jokes in this episode were very just meme-wormy, especially from Luna, and especially Twilight, and her constant overbearing freak-outs in her adorable tutu outfit. The episode was funny, heartwarming, action-packed, and all-around exciting, and I love it. Number 2, Shadow Play. Now, let's get the big elephant out of the room out of the way. Obviously, what's keeping this episode back from number 1 is the fact that we finally get to meet the ever-so-powerful Starsworld the Bearded, and we find out he's a complete and total asshole. And I am not a fan of that, and it kind of makes Starsworld one of the worst characters in the entire show, as he basically comes off as an arrogant, condescending prick. However, aside from that, the episode was amazing. Not only did it basically get all of the legends back together and seeing Twilight basically, with Sunbird's help, get all the pillars back, but we also get to see the return of the Pony of Shadows, something that was brought up back in Castlemania Season 4, and to finally see it come to fruition. Now, it's not really the most flashy finale, if I'm being perfectly honest, considering that the Pony of Shadows does almost absolutely nothing after the first 5 minutes of Part 2, and the rest of it is essentially just to act the Pony of Shadows down. And then we learn about the truth about the Pony of Shadows, and we find out that Starsworld the Bearded is essentially the main reason why pretty much everything in the episode was his fault. And learning about the truth of Stygian, and essentially that it's actually Starlight that ends up being the one to save the day, as Twilight is able to take her students' advice and hear out staging into what actually ended up happening, and that not every bad guy has to be defeated with pew-pew lasers. So yeah, aside from essentially the Pony of Shadows doing almost absolutely nothing by the most of Part 2, and really starts World the Bearded being one of the most condescending, inconsiderate asshole characters in the show, this was definitely a great finale, but I still think that Twilight's Kingdom is better. And obviously, that episode didn't have an asshole character. Technically it did. What the difference was, the asshole character was the villain, not the hero. But yeah, other than that, Shadowplay is still a great finale, and it's still overall a great episode, if not for one more, and I think you know what it is. The #1 best episode of Friendship is Magic Season 7 is Perfect Pair. This was practically a perfect episode. The episode that focuses on what the fandom had been asking for 7 seasons, the origin of Applejack's parents. And it is heavily implied that they are both dead. But seeing their love story, how they fell in love with each other, and how the Apples learned about their parents through various different ponies throughout Ponyville, makes this one of the most adorable, exciting, and probably one of the most tragic episodes of the entire show when you really think about it. And on top of that, William Shatner as Grandpère should have deserved an Oscar for this episode. And especially that final reading on Fine in that wedding, it absolutely breaks my heart, but it's all the more worth it as they're able to let go of all the resentment and being able to be there for the new generation of apples in Big Mac, Applejack, and Apple Bloom. There is literally nothing about this episode I can complain about. It is practically a perfect episode, one of the show's best, and this is one of those episodes you have to watch and see to fully get the entire episode. And that is why Perfect Pair is the best episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 7. Alright, so now that we've hit one of the high points, next time we're going to have to hit the very low point. Because next time is going to be the season where everybody agrees that next time it is going to be universally what many fans consider to be the worst season of the entire show. Next time we are going to be counting down the top 24 episodes of the show's worst season, Season 8. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.